Okay, Boker Tov. So today's daf is Yudalid. We pick up in the middle of Yud Gimel on Bet, and we're dealing with, of course, Matzah Merkava. So presumably everything we're talking about is not the secret stuff, and we pick up with where are we? Amalei Rapapala Abaye Elamiata Dechsiv 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, about 9 lines down in the medium-sized lines. Line starts with the word Dechsiv. So we're dealing with the fact that the vision of the faces on the divine throne in one verse it's a lion, an eagle, or probably a vulture, an ox, and a human. And another one, instead of the ox, it's a kruv, which is a cherub, which is explained here as like an infant's face. And it says that because Yechezkel prayed to God that it should change because you don't want the ox that reminds God of the Masa Egel up there in Shemayim. And again, fascinating, like a similar statement earlier by David HaMelech about what types of forces are up, what type of, like the bad stuff, the meteorological tragedies, are they kept up in heaven, are they kept down in the earth? So on the one hand, all of the way in which God is so transcendent and distant, and then at the same time, people pray and changes the very look of how things look up in Shemayim. Anyway, so now the Gemara says, Amalei Rapapala Abaye Elamiata Dechsiv Pnei Echad Pnei Kruv Pnei Hashani Pnei Adam V'Ashlishi Pnei Aryeh V'Arvi Pnei Nesher. Actually, we did that, but we'll read it again. Hainu Pnei Kruv, Hainu Pnei Adam. So if you're saying Kruv is a child, so what does it mean that one is the face of a child and one is the face of a human? They're both human faces. So he says, Ape Ravavi V'Ape Zutre. No, there's the face of an adult and there's a face of a child. There's literally big face and small face. And those also become significant terms in Kabbalah. One verse says, now when you're moving from the throne to the angels, each angel had 6 wings. Because of another verse, not in Yechezkel, but in Yeshayahu says, each one had 4 faces and had 4 wings. So what is it? 6 wings or 4 wings? The says, Lokash, the Kam Bizman Beis Hamikdash Kayim. So Yeshayahu was at the time there was a Beis Hamikdash. Kam Bizman Beis Hamikdash Kayim. When there's no Beis Hamikdash, actually wait, that doesn't work. Oh, I'm sorry, I got it reversed. Yeshayahu saw 6 wings. I'm sorry, I quoted reversed. Yeshayahu saw 6 wings, Sheish Knafayim, and Yechezkel saw 4 wings. So the Gemara says, Kam Bizman Beis Hamikdash Kayim. When there was a Beis Hamikdash, there were 6 wings. And when there wasn't a Beis Hamikdash, there were 4. Now, Yechezkel saw his vision in exile, but it was still a few years before the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. But Rashi sort of says that it was like anticipating the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so that's the difference between the 6 and the 4. So now the Gemara explains, Kibiyachol, it's as if Shenizmatu Kanfei HaChayot, as if the destruction of the temple caused the wings of the angels to become fewer. So what happens down here, again, affects what's above, whether that's for good or for bad. But again, on the one hand, this tremendous sense of transcendence, but on the other hand, the relationship of what happens down here for what happens above. Okay, so now Rashi says, by the way, the Kibiyachol doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It really was to Nisma to Kanfei HaChayot, but Kibiyachol just meant that that's not usually an appropriate way of talking about things relating to God, like something lacking occurred. But the reality is that actually, or things related to God, but that's actually what happened. So now the Gemara says, now of course the idea, by the way, I should say, on the one hand, right, you have the sense of the tremendous transcendence, right, the whole Gemara before about, hundreds of thousands of years to get up to heaven. But on the other hand, the very fact that you're having a vision and you're seeing him in such concrete terms itself basically speaks about a fundamental connection and a relationship. So again, it is interesting about the sort of the way in which the Gemara is dealing with, how things down here impact things up there. Yes. Oh, you mean? Oh, yeah, it's a good point. Like normally, kibiyachol is something used by God, and here you're even using the term kibiyachol by angels. That's a fascinating point. Yeah, right. That's a very good point. Okay, so now it says, Haiminayu imot. So which two of the 6 were reduced? Were taken, were lost after the Korban Abayis. So there are those that cover the face and those that cover the legs. Which 2 were lost? So Amarav Chanan al Amarav Osen Sha'omos Shira Behen, the 2 wings that they would use to sing to God. Ksiv Hacha, it says here, B'shtayim Yofeif, and 2 they would fly, so that's not exactly singing. It says 2 they'd cover their faces, 2 they'd cover their legs, and 2 they would fly. But the flying ones are going to be identified as the singing ones. The Karazel Zeh, and they call one to another, right? And they praise God. The Amar, right? Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. So therefore it mentions flying, but it also mentions singing to God, praising God. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. The and another verse says, Ayef einecha bo ve'einenu. So that's a cute play on words. Like if you flutter your eyes, it'll disappear. So faith, to fly, to flutter, and to flutter your eyes. So those are the ones that disappear. And that obviously makes a lot of sense. If the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, there's less shira that is being said up above. And as the Gemara is going to relate to later, and Tosfos relates to now, I'll get back to the Tosfos, the whole connection, right, about, we say Kaddish below and they say Kaddish above, the Karazel Zed, the connection of our singing Shira to God, and we had it before about that, about the angels are silent when we say Shira, we're silent when they say Shira, one in the night, one in the day. So if there's no Beit HaMikdash, then the Shira up in heaven is itself, has itself, been minimized. Yes.
The wings are singing.
The wings are singing.
So it's kara ze el ze.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that.
One
wing to the next wing. Oh, that's
wing.
interesting. That's interesting. That's possibly how you're reading. That's reading it. Right. That's a good point. Okay. Okay. Rabbananami, so that's one approach about which two are no longer around. Rabbananami, the rabbis say, Osen shemachasos behen raglehen, the ones they use to cover their legs. Shene'emar v'raglehen regel yishara. Okay, and their legs were a straight leg, so that's in the vision of Yechezkel. So when he only saw 4 wings, but he saw their legs. V'ilo di'moit, and if those wings had not been the ones that were reduced, minave yada, how did he know what the legs looked like? He only could know what the legs looked like if they were no longer being covered. So the Gemara says, no, that doesn't prove anything. Maybe the wings are still there, but he saw the legs when the wings were like, when you open and close your wings. So when the legs were revealed, he saw them, but it doesn't mean the wings weren't there. If you don't say that, how about the other thing he saw? He saw what their faces looked like. So hachanami, will we say that they are lacking the wings that covered their face? Nobody wants to say that. Ella, and anyway, you can't say they're lacking both the face wings and the leg wings. They're only lost one set. Ella diglai v'chazilei, they were revealed, when they opened their wings. Hachanami diglai v'chazilei, here too they were revealed. So the Gemara says, 1 minute. How's that possible? It's one thing, the face. You would reveal your face in the presence of your master. So therefore, it's possible they had those wings that covered their face, and they were, they revealed their face in the presence of God, the angels. But kare, one's legs, if the legs were covered and they had wings to cover it, they would never uncover them in the presence of God. So therefore, if Yechezkel could see the wings, it must be not that they basically could see the legs. It must be basically that not that they had the wings, but they happened to have revealed their legs. They would never have done such a thing. It must be fundamentally they did not have their wings all together. So, okay, so that's the other opinion. Now, it should say, again, if you think about the symbolism, one is the angels can't sing anymore to God or can't sing with their wings. The others, though, is that they're like standing half naked before God. I mean, if it wasn't obvious, the Gemara has spelled it out right now, that the problem is that nobody would ever, in the presence of, God, in the presence of the Master, reveal their legs, right? That's completely disrespectful. So they're basically standing partially naked in the presence of God. So that creates this other sense of being stripped of the Beit HaMikdash, right? And that sense of being in exile, and the way in which we are now, have been like stripped, naked or partially naked. So it's a different type of a way in which going down here reflects what's going or impacts what's going on up there. All right. So now the Gemara continues. Where were we? Okay. Now let's deal with some other contradictions. One verse says, this is in Taniya. We're no longer in, what do you call it? We're no longer in Yeshaya and Yechezkel. Elef alfin yesham shunei. Thousands upon thousands, or thousands, a million, attend to him, God. The Rabu reading Kadamohi, and a myriad of myriads. So a myriad is 10,000. So 10,000 times 10,000 is 100 million. Okay. Anyway, are in God's presence. Yikumun. Kadamo Yikumun, a stand in his presence. Because of Echad Omer, but another verse in Eov says, Hayesh mispar ligdudav. Is there any number to God's troops? So they're infinite. So it's not just 100 million, it's infinite. So Gemara says, lo kash, it's not difficult. Kan bizman beis hamikdash kayim, kan bizman kein beis hamikdash kayim. Same thing. Eov was presumably when there still was a beis hamikdash. We don't exactly know when Eov was, but Yechezkel again. Oh no, Daniel. It says now we're in Daniel. Daniel clearly was after the Churban, and therefore it went down from infinite to 100 million. Kibiyachol shenismatu famalia shamala. As if saying, again, because, we're not supposed to say these types of things of God. So, Kibiyachol, what happened was God's great family, Famalia, right, retinue, had become smaller. Tanya, we turn the Brisa, Rabbi Omer Mishum Abi Yossi ben Tosai, Elef Alfin Yisham Shunei, Mispar Gedud Echad. So the thousands of thousands, the million that attend to God, that is the number of God's troops. One troop, what do they call it? Of a legion of soldiers. And his legions are infinite. So that's how he reconciled the verse, right? The verse in Daniel that says he has 1 million who attend to him, that's just the number of people in one of his legions. But the verse in Eov says he has an infinite number of legions. So it all works out. Each legion that's infinite has 1 million in it. Tanya, we done the Brisa. I'm sorry, Rabbi Yomi bar Abba Amar, thousands attend to him, so that's 1 million. Linahar dinur. Those are the ones that emerge from the river of fire. Now the word dinur means of fire. Okay, it's Aramaic. It's from the verse in Daniel that we're about to read. But it also starts becoming the proper name of this river, Nahar Dinur. Let me actually read you the verse in Daniel because we're going to be unpacking that today or whatever, looking at that.
Fireworks in modern Hebrew are zikukei dinur.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We're going to get to
See, Daniel is alive.
Well, how about just chashmal and yeah, I know, but I'm saying that's like the word we had yesterday. That's like, oh, come on. What? Here we go. What? Here we go. Okay. I'll read you the Hebrew, then I'll read you the English. Chazei haves, I saw, adi krasav remin, until the atik yomin yisiv, until the thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat, God. Levushei kislag chivar, his cloak, his garment was like a white snow. Usarei sheik amar nikei, and the hair of his head was like a clean wool. Karsiyeh Shavivin Dinur, his throne was tongues of flame. There's your Dinur, Shavin. Galgaloi Nur Dalik, the wheels were like a lit flame, were blazing fire. Nahar Dinur Nagade, so a river Dinur of fire stretched out. V'nafek min kadamohi, and came from God's presence. Elef alfin yisham shunei, thousands upon thousands attended to him. V'ribu rivin kadamohi, myriads of myriads, kimo yikumun, stood before him. Dina yasiv v'sifrin petichu. And he was writing, the court sat and the books were open. Sounds pretty relevant for what's coming up in a few days. That's the vision in Daniel. So let's take a look. So those thousands of thousands that attended to him, Nahar Dinur, those were those that emerged from the river of fire. Nahar Dinur Naged v'nafek min kadamohi. This river of fire came from his presence. Okay, so presumably, though, as opposed to seeming to say Eov, who said the total number of God's retinue is infinite, but the thousands of thousands and myriad of myriads, those were just the ones that came from this river of fire. Okay, Meheicha Nafik, now where do they come out of, or where does this, river of fire come from? And hence, where do the angels come from? Mizeyasan shel chayot, from the sweat of the heavenly beasts, the other vision of the beasts that was seen in heaven. So their sweat makes this river of fire, and the angels emerge from that. Ulehecha and Shafich, and where does this river pour out to? Amarav Zuta Bartuvia, Amarav, Arosh V'Shayim Begehenim. So this river of fire pours out onto the head of the wicked in Gehenim. Shenemar, Hinei Sarat Hashem Chema Yatzah. Behold, the anger of the whirlwind of God, anger comes out, V'Sa'ar Mitcholel Arosh V'Shayim, and this again whirlwind that falls upon the head of the wicked. Yachul shall fall on their head. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar Alasher Kumtu, on those that it was decreed that they should have been created. Shene'emar, as it says, Asher Kumtu v'lo eight, those that were, again, Rashi reads this word as decreed, and it was not yet their time. Nahar Yutzak Yisodam, a river that was pouring out is their foundation. Now, what does this mean, those that were decreed? So the Gemara is going to explain. Tanya, we turn to Brisa, Amar Shimon HaChasid, Elu Tesha Me'ot Reshivim V'Arba Dorot. These are the 974 generations. Shekumtu Li Bara'ot, where it was decreed that they should have been created. Kodem Sheniva Olam, before the world was created. Meaning, it's based on the verse that the idea that it says Davar Tziva Le'elef Dor, God's command was commanded for 1,000 generations. The Gemara reads that not that just that the Torah was given for eternity and for thousands of generations, but that the Torah was given after 1,000 generations, or should have been given after 1,000 generations. Now, if you count the generations from Adam until Matan Torah, you only get 26. So what happened to the other 974 generations that should have preceded Matan Torah? Well, God realized that the world could not wait 1,000 generations for Matan Torah. So he had to speed things up and give it after only 26 generations, and the other 974 that should have been created, apparently, they also would have been like real Rishaim, because that was part of the reason why we had to speed things up, because we needed Torah. So therefore, what's going to happen to them? The Lo Nivru, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'Shatlan, so God stood up and deposited them, B'chol Dor V'Dor, so they get sort of distributed over time, these 976 generations that could not have been, could not have been created, not 974, excuse me, there were 26. I said 24, I'm a mistake. 974 generations. It was 26 until Matan Torah that were distributed over all time. The Heinin Azei Panim Shabador, and those are the brazen people that you find in every generation. Those were the ones that have been distributed from the 974 that were too wicked and were not created. Okay, so now, of course, the question is, why are they getting this, fire poured on their head? Because they're Rishoyim. That's all very nice, but they're Rishoyim that have never had the chance to be Rishoyim because they were never created. So Tosas is a little bit bothered by that. So Tosas says, if you look at Rosas, before it says that they were deposited, he says the first opinion was that they were just in Gehenim and not created. Will God do judgment without justice? So what are they doing in Gehenim? Okay, it's one thing to say they got spread out over all future generations, but another thing to say they weren't created under Gehenim and being punished because they would have been Rishayim. Okay, so V'nir lefarish v'tir den shelo nivru b'yachad. So Tosfos says no, it all means the same thing, that they were distributed in every generation. Okay, and therefore, if they're going to be punished with this river of fire, it's only when they actually are created and do evil. But that's not. But that's over, the wicked people in each generation, or the brazen people. Why?
400 years of
Oh, haha, good punch. He had to change it to 10, 1,000. He had to change to 26. Right. Good point. 26, by the way, is also the gematria of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, for those keeping score. I don't know. Anyway, so the Gemara says like this. Rav Nan bar Yitzchak Amar Asher Kumtu Li Bracha. No, those that was decreed for blessing. Who Dichsiv Elu Tamidei Chachamim Shemekamtin Atzman Al Divrei Torah B'Olam Hazeh. Again, not exactly clear how to wording this word Mekamet. Rashi before said it meant to be decreed, but anyway, somehow dedicate themselves for Torah, or have been created for Torah in this world. God will reveal to them the secrets in the future. Shenemar Nahar Yutzak, the poured river Yisodam, is their foundation, but reading also is their secret. So this river in Eov is not the river of fire in Daniel. The river of fire in Daniel, that's for the Rishayim. This river, and that's where the angels come from, and that's the sweat of the heavenly Chayot. The river in Eov, that's for the righteous. Okay. Amalei Shmuel. So now we're going to have some stories. We had some like before about trying to teach people Maaseh Bereshis. Now we're going to try to teach people Maaseh Merkava. Let's take a look. Actually, no, that's coming a little later. I jumped ahead. But first the story. Amalei Shmuel Chia bar Rav bar Arya. Bar Rav. So Shmuel said to Chia bar Rav, bar Arya, son of the lion, meaning his father was a great person. Ta emelecha milsa mehani mili mal yusa dahavi amar avuch. Come, let me tell you one of the great things that your father used to teach. Kol yom of yoma, here's what your father used to teach every day. Kol yom of yoma, nivrei malachi ashayis minahar dinur. Heavenly angels are created from the river of Dinur. We said before that comes from the sweat of the Chayot, and that's where the angels are created from. The Amri Shira, and they say Shira Ubatli, and then after they say their prayer, they cease to exist. Shene'emar, as the verse says, Chadashim lib karim, rabba emunatecha. New to every morning, great is your faithfulness, God. So exactly what it means faithfulness in this context. Marsha says it means you show your, every day you demonstrate, God demonstrates mechayich b'chol yom hazeh b'reishi. It's not just as the world recreated, the angels are recreated, and they are created every day just for the one purpose of saying Shirah, and then they stop existing. Sort of like this idea that angels, exist for like one purpose. Also sort of like, what are those bees that they live one day and they sting you and they die or something like that? No, anyway. What? It's not just one day. They sting you and they die. I think there's some other insect that lives for like one day. Anyway. All right. Anyway, so Tosos, now that's the idea. There's an interesting Tosos about how this might inform the language we say in Kedusha. If you look at Tosos, the previous daf, Mizeatan Shel Chayot, Tosos says the following: V'yotzi mimenu malachim. So this from this river of Dinor comes angels. V'omim shira umiyad nitradim, and immediately they cease to exist. V'hachim latina b'midrash chadashim libkarim shebar malachim b'chol yom v'omim shira v'nitradim lahen. Funny why he quoted a midrash since it's the Gemara coming up. That also spells out why they stop to exist. Because there's a sign among the angels, hakvuim, the regular angels, not the ones that are newly created, but the old hands at it, the ones that are always around, those angels. They know there's a secret sign that they know when they're supposed to start singing Shira to God. Okay, but that's because they've been around the bend, so they know the sign. The Elu Chadashim, the new ones, Shenim Yodim Hadas, they don't know about the rules. They were created, and they don't know when they're supposed to start singing Shira. Mimarim Lo Shorer, they begin singing as soon as they're created. And since they speak out of turn, and when they're not right at the time, they have to be destroyed. I don't know what the moral message is here, but okay. And now we understand what we say, like in Yotzev, they give permission this one to that one. Kedusha kulam kechad onim v'omrim. So they have to give permission before you say kedusha. Okay, you got to wait for the right time. V'gam lamala yotzer mishartim v'asher mishartav. God, you create attendance. V'asher mishartav kulam omdim b'rum olam. Kulomar b'chol yom borei chadashim. That's yotzer mishartim. You create new attendants. The nitradim, those disappear right away. Those get destroyed. Aval mishartav, the fixed ones, hakfuim, those v'omdim la'ad. So yotzer mishartim, you create new ones, but those are just the ones you dispose of on a daily basis. Vasher mishartav, kulam omdim b'rum olam. But the fixed attendants, those are staying on high, and those continue to sing. So you see the whole culture of disposable items. I hope he recycles them or something. So that anyway, so there's a fascinating idea about these angels created just to disappear, and Tosos continues elaborating on that whole like image and the story of what's going on there. Dov, you wanted to say something before?
Association with this river of fire. So these beings are like sparks. The way sparks come up out of a fire.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a nice image, and that's why. That's nice. The sense that it's only a moment, like for a moment, like a spark that then sort of burns out instantaneously.
Seems to be consonant with the whole imagery.
Oh, that's a very nice idea. And somehow there's like some praise to God even in that brief moment, right? I mean, that's a very nice point. Look, it's also a beautiful point to think about. I mean, not to connect it to the previous homosechet of Moed Katan, and where a lot was dealt with about children dying, chas v'shalom, and those types of issues. The imagery that some people, like some things are created just to serve God briefly. That's a helpful type of an image. So that's okay. So now the Gemara continues. It says the following. Okay. So upliga the Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani. That argues on Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani. Damar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonasan. Kol divrei sheyotze mi pi Baruch Hu nivra mimenu malach. Every utterance that comes from God, an angel is created. So it's not created from the river of fire. It's created directly from God. Right? An interesting question of how much you want to directly associate them to get with God or create a certain sense of distance. The Shenemar, as the verse says, Bidvar Hashem Shamayim Na'asu. With God's word, the heavens were created. Biruch Piv, and with the wind, the breath of his mouth, Kol Tzvam, all of their hosts. So the hosts being the angels. Okay, now one verse says, back to the Psukim in Daniel, Livushay Keter Chivar, his cloak is like the white snow, Bisar Reshe Ka'amar Nakeh, and the hair of his head is like white wool, it's like clean wool. The Ksiv in another verse says, that God's locks are like, the layered locks are as black as a raven. So are they white or are they black? So Gemara says, Lo kasha, kan b'yeshiva, kan b'mochama. One is when God is sitting, meaning like in council, acting as a sage, and one is when God is going out to war. The Amar ein l'chana b'yeshiva lezakein. So what's appropriate for one who is sitting like in council, as being an elder, older. Ve'ein l'chana eben milchama. And what's best in war is ela bachor, is youth. Okay, so God looks like a youth, right, when he's in yeshiva, and when he's in war, and he looks like an elder when he's b'yeshiva. It's like we say in the Anim Zmirot, right? What's the line? What's the line there? Yeah, no, but it's like something like about how you've been imagined in different ways, right? What is it? Dimu oscha v'lo k'fi yeshcha v'yashluch lefi masecha. Zikna uvacharus, what is it?
Zikna v'acharut.
Yeah, thank you. Zikna b'yom din uvacharut b'yom karav. So there you go, exactly that, right? It's a good Gemara. They have compared you with many visions, but ultimately you're one. They saw you both in old age and in youth. Usa roshcha, the hair of your head, b'seiva, with a hoary head, v'shacharut, and black hair. Zikna b'yom din, uvacharus b'yom karav. So the being an elder is in the day of judgment, yeshiva, again that whole sense of judgment, and youth in the time of war, ki'ish milchamot yadav v'avlav. So there you go. That's exactly based on this Gemara and that Psukim. By the way, we should mention the Yom Din here in the Yeshiva, as I read from the Pasuk in Daniel, and I'm serious, directly probably the imagery that informs some of the imagery of Rosh Hashanah is God sitting with the books open in front of him. That was exactly the image in Daniel of the vision of God. Yes, Charlie.
Did Rambam comment on this section of Gemara?
Rambam's, I don't know, he did not give a line-by-line commentary. As I said when we started this parak, Rambam reads certainly the general category of Maaseh Breshit as physics and astronomy, sort of science of the natural world, and Maaseh Merkava as theology, but of understanding it very much in the rationalist sense. So what he would say was all this. I imagine he would say that it's all a mashal. Okay. All right, moving on. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. One verse says, Karsei Shivivin Dinur, his throne is like flames of fire. Again, that's Dinur. Because of Echad Omer, and another verse says right there in the same section, Adi Karson Ramav, until the thrones are set up. The Atik Yomi Nasiv, and the Ancient of Days sits upon them. So it's throne or thrones. So the Gemara says, Lo Gasha, Ka Echad Lo Vechad LeDavid. One throne for him and one throne for the other king, for the earthly king, for David. Kidatanya, like we done in Brisa. Echad Lo Vechad LeDavid. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. That's what Rabbi Akiva says. Amar Rabbi Yossi Aglili. So Rabbi Yossi Aglili said to him, Akiva, Ad matayat ose shchina chol. Akiva, how long are you going to make the divine presence into something secular? You're putting a human being up there on the throne next to God? Completely inappropriate. Ella echad ledin ve'echad litzdaka. Therefore, the two different attributes of God, right? And again, remember, it's a vision of God sitting in justice. It's mamish, the Rosh Hashanah imagery, right? So one is the throne of justice, and the other is the throne of righteousness, of like tzedakah often is righteousness, but here it means more of like compassion, of doing kindness. So therefore, it's not two things. It's not God and David. It's only God up there, but God has two thrones, right? And we have that imagery, like God removes himself from the throne of Din and goes to the throne of Rachamim. So that's the imagery here. Which mode is God judging the world in? Okay, so now the Gemara says, Kib lamine or lo kib lamine? Did Rabbi Akiva accept this critique or not? Tashma, come in here, we have a Braita. Echad ledin ve'echad litzdaka, divrei Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva wound up saying what Rabbi Yossi Aglili said to him, that so obviously he accepted the critique, and now he repeated this saying, that two thrones, a throne of justice and a throne of kindness or compassion. Amar Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah said to him, he wasn't happy. Akiva, ma'lecha eitzel Haggadah. Akiva, what are you doing here by Haggadah? Like, okay, you say one thing, somebody corrects you, so you say what the other person said. Like, this isn't your conversation. So, klach midibratecha, leave your words, stop talking, and go eitzel negoim ve'oholot. Go to the really hard parts of Shas, negoim and oholos, the complicated halachic parts. You're the master there. Nobody else can hold a match to you there. Go there. Let us talk about Haggadah. Okay. Ella, here's what it really means. Echad l'kisei ve'echad l'sharfaf. So Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah did not even like the idea of God having two thrones. That still suggests some sense of multiplicity in the present, related to God, even if not another being, but some sense of a non-total singularity. So it's not two thrones. It is a throne and a footstool. Okay, kisei leishev alav, the throne to sit on, sharfaf ladom raglav, and the footstool for his feet. Shenemar hasheman kisi v'aretz adom raglav. Okay, so there you go. That makes it better. So one also wonders in all of these things, is there also some concern, either about other Gnosticism or Christianity and other types of things that have to deal with, questions about the total singularity of God, particularly the issue of David, who's a king, and from David comes the Messiah, the Mashiach, right, which we understand obviously in very earthly terms, but it's still on it, so that obviously is a very dangerous type of of an imagery. Yes, Dov.
There could be perhaps a slight sort of indication of the primacy of Haggadah, of Haggadata. In other words, listen, you're like a halachist.
Right.
Like, go back and do your technical stuff.
Right. I don't know.
You're not a you don't get this.
Right.
Just leave that to us.
Right.
Like the big picture.
Right. Okay, but you're inserting all of that subtext you just inserted. Okay. I'm saying you can say the exact opposite. You do the real stuff. This is the Narishkeit. You don't, but that's not your field. Let us do it, okay? I understand. I'm just saying. What they're saying is this isn't your field. What type of a hierarchy they're creating between those two fields is not in the text. But they're basically saying, you know what? Leave the Haggadah to us. This is not your thing. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, Rashi had in his commentary on Daniel has a very different take on this. On the context.
Okay, fine. I am sure he does, but I did not check it.
Where he might have gotten.
Oh, I don't know. It is also worth noting, by the way, that with all that they're telling Rabbi Akiva, you have nothing to do with these discussions. It's well accepted, by there's strong indications, as we're going to see by Rabbi Akiva Nichnas Lepardes, but other indications as well, that Rabbi Akiva was a mystic. So it is interesting, Now, is mysticism the exact same and trying to reach some type of a, of a state, of an alternative state of being? Is that the same as being able to interpret these types of verses and being a master of Haggadah? Not necessarily, but not every Kabbalist can give a good sermon, exactly. But it is interesting. It's not like he was just a rationalist, halachist, Rabbi Akiva. Okay. Anyway, so now the Gemara continues. So now we're shifting gears a little bit. 18 curses. Yeshayahu cursed Israel, told them about all the terrible things that were going to happen to them when the temple was going to be destroyed. And he didn't sort of calm down until he got to this verse, which is at the end of the list of predictions, and curses in Yeshayahu. The youth will lord over, bully over the old, and the nikla, which is the answer of nichbad, right? Nichbad is from the word kaved, heavy. So the weighty, and the honored will, will be sort of lorded over and bullied by the nikla, by the lowly. Okay, and that was sort of like the worst thing to say, which is interesting. He doesn't elaborate on why that's worse than everything that precedes, but now we're going to spell it all out. Asar klalos ma'ininu. What were the 10 curses? The verse says, Hinei Adon Hashem tzvakot meisirim Yerushalayim Yehuda. Behold, the Lord will take away from Jerusalem and from Judea and from Judah. Mish'anu mishana. We're going to spell out what all these things mean, but it means a support and a right, and I don't know what's the synonym for support. Okay. Anyway, kol charashim v'navo. Excuse me, I skipped a line. Kol mishan lechem v'kol mishan mayim. All supports of bread and all supports of water. Gibor v'ish milchama. A mighty person and a man of war. Shofet v'navi. A judge and a prophet. V'koseim, which is interesting. Koseim is normally somebody that necromancer or magic. So we'll see what the Gemara does with that. V'zakein, and an elder. Sar chamishim, an officer of 50. V'nesu panim, someone of lifted up face, an honorable person. V'yoetz, an advisor. V'chacham, a wise. V'chacham charashim, wise in literally charashim, which means like in crafts, skilled craftsman. V'navon lachash, understanding of lachash, which also might mean some type of like a of like incantations, but obviously the Gemara is not going to explain it that way. V'nasati, so all of these leaders are going to be removed and wise people. V'nasati narim sarayim, instead I will give the youth as their masters. V'ta'alulim yimshalubam, and the babes will rule over them. And the end of the verse that the Gemara sticks in, because if you've been counting, that's not 10 yet. So the end of the verse is v'nigash ha'am ish be'ish v'ish b're'ehu, and people will fight one against the other. And then it says that final verse about the na'ar will bully the zakein and the nikla b'nichbad. Okay, so those are the 10 curses until you got to the final one that we quoted before. What? 18? Oh, Shmona Esrei. I'm sorry, 18. I don't know why I said Esrei, because I skipped the word Shmona. 18. Anyway, count it. Somehow there's 18 there. Okay, I have to admit I did not count it. Okay, so Mishan, maybe we can do the counting now, all right? Mishan, number 1, Elu Bali Mikra, those that know Psukim. Okay, so the Gemara is going to interpret almost all of this from the lens of Torah. By Mishana, in the feminine, but the support, Elu Bali Mishnah, which, by the way, it almost sounds like the word mishana and is in the feminine, mishnah. Okay, so that's people who know Torah, people who know Mishnah, that's 2. If go on Rabbi ben Tema v'chaveirav, like Rabbi ben Tema and his friends, they like were complete masters of the Mishnah. Now there's a debate of Rav Papa and Rabbanan. Chadam or sheish miot sidrei Mishnah. One says in the time of Yeshayahu there were 600 Sidarim of Mishnah. So that was what was lost. We had the real mastery of Mishnah, and all of the teachings. There was much more Torah that has been lost to us. 600 orders of Mishnah. V'chad Amar, like 10 times essentially what we have now. V'chad Amar Shiva Meos Sidrei Mishnah, 700 orders of Mishnah. Actually, not 10 times, 100 times, because we're not talking about Mesechtos, we're talking about Sidarim. So instead of 6 Sidarim, there were 600, and so it says 700. Okay. So that was lost. So Mikra and Mishnah, Kol Mishan Lechem Elu Balei Talmud. So those who masters of the Talmud, of the analysis. Shenemar L'chu Lachmu B'Lachmi V'Shetu B'Yein Masachti. Come and eat in my bread and drink the wine of my anointing. So that again, how exactly that proves that bread is Talmud is not clear, but obviously that is the more like the basic thing that fills you up. That's the thing that is the staple of life from the Gemara's perspective is the Talmud. Oh, that's cute. Mesechet. Oh, I didn't think about that. I was thinking there might be a play in the word of like milchama, because like milchamta shel Torah, but that's cute. Mesechti. I hadn't thought about that. Very nice. Okay, so that's 3. The kol mishan mayim, water. Elu balei agada, shemoshchin libo shel adam k'mayim. Bagada, that draws your heart like water flows. It's flowing, it's drawing your heart. It doesn't say that it's a necessity of life like water. Okay, getting back to the other question about their relative relationship. So now we have Talmud and Agada, that's 4. Gibor zebal shmuot. Gibor is a person who knows many teachings. Again, exactly how that's different than Mishnah. Presumably that's teachings more of of Amoraic teachings. Of course, this is all anachronistic this time of Yeshayahu. But anyway, somebody who's a master of many traditions. Okay, what are we up to? 5. V'ish kosein. I'm sorry, I skipped the line. V'ish milchama, person of war. Zesh yodeh lisablitein b'milchamta shel Torah. There's the milchama analogy. Somebody who knows how to fight the war of Torah, really good at the analysis and argumentation. What are we up to? 6, 7. Shofet zedayan. So shofet is a judge. Shadan din emet liyamito, who does the true justice. Navi kimashma'o. Navi is clear what that means. I think we're up to 8. Kosein zemelech. Kosein, which is a difficult one, right? Because it's like a necromancer. No, that's a king. Shenemar kesem al siftei melech. A charm is on the lips of the king. Okay, so that's 9. Zakein zeh shero'i liyeshiva. Zakein is somebody who is worthy of sitting in the council of sages. So we're up to 10. Sar chamishim. I'll take Sar chamishim. Ela sar chumashim. Somebody who's a master. I guess it's better than mikra. Bali mikra. Maybe people just have it memorized. Here are people that really know how to analyze it and discuss it. Davar acher sar chamishim kid Rabbi Avo. The Amar Rabbi Avo mikan she'en ma'amidi miturgaman al tzibur pachos mi-chamishim shana. Somebody does not get to be the translator for the community less than 50 years old, because obviously that's a position of a lot of responsibility, making the Torah intelligible to the people. So that is the star. There's a sense of even being a master. It's not just a lowly job to be able to translate. Also still to connect to Chumashim, though. Okay, to the Mikra. V'nesu panim, zeh shenosim panim l'doro ba'avuro. So somebody who, that is, the respect is shown to the entire generation for this person's sake. Lamala, in terms of respect of heaven shown to the people. So Kigon Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, like Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, referring to other Gemaras where Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa says like the whole world is sustained because of the merits of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. So the whole, in heaven they show favor to the whole generation because of him. Lamata, favor shown below, Kigon Rabbi Avo be Kesar, like Rabbi Avo who is respected in the Kesar's house. So that's different people who command respect. Yo'etz, sort of, Yo'etz, which is counsel, but something that requires like a lot of very specialized, knowledge, is somebody that knows how to do the intercalation of the years and to establish the months. The Chacham, Zeh Tamid HaMachkim et Rabotav. And a Chacham is a student who can sharpen his rabbis by his insights and questions. Charashim, so we're separating the word Chacham from Charashim. When he opens his mouth in the words of Torah, everybody else comes to be like a cheresh, like somebody who cannot hear or cannot speak. He silences everybody else. V'navon zeh shamevin cheres, which might mean like pottery, also maybe. V'navon zeh mivin davar mitoch davar, as one who's understanding, because somebody can infer one thing from another. Lachash, whispering or incantations. Zeh sharoy lim surlo divrei Torah shenitna b'lachas. This is the type of person you can give the secret Torah. And I will remind you that the Gemara before said the only person you can tell over, I forget if it was Masa Bereshis or Masa Merkava, but it was somebody who was, and it quoted this pasuk, right? It was Sar Chamashim, Yoetz Gibor, etc. That was the Gemara earlier, right? It says, Ein Moshin Divrei Torah, Amar Rabbi Yami, Ein Moshin Sitrei Torah, Al Mishi Yesh Bo Chamisha Dvarim, Sar Chamashim V'nesu Panim, V'yoetz V'chacham Charashim V'navon Lachash. The word Lachash here is at the end. Who do you give the Lachash to? The person who has all of these qualities. Okay. Now the final verse, I will give the youth as their, or getting to the end, I will give the youth as their masters. So it can't just be young, because we're translating all of this about mitzvahs and Torah. So these are the people that are are completely emptied of mitzvot. Okay, as opposed to all of the people that were the real Torah scholars and the leaders and so on. And now the people empty of mitzvot will be the leaders. V'ta'alulim yum shalubam, and babes will rule over them. So it's going to read this as the Aramaic word tala, which means a fox. Amar of Papa Bar Yaakov, ta'alei b'nei ta'alei. So ta'alulim in the double, foxes, son of foxes. So like, sort of like, lowly people who descend from lowly people. And even after all this, Yeshaya wasn't put to rest. Ad shemer lahem yirhavu na'ar b'zakein v'nichla b'nichbad. Elu b'nei adam shem, so na'ar again is b'nei adam shem nu'arim min ha'mitzvot, people that are emptied of mitzvot. Yirhavu, they will lord over or bully. Allah Yiravu b'mi shemimuleh b'mitzvot kerimon, somebody who's filled with a mitzvot like a pomegranate, which is a phrase the Gemara uses elsewhere. Not exactly clear to me how it's getting that in the word zakein, but okay. But anyway, but clearly to create the contrast. V'hanikla b'nichbad, and the lowly, the despised with the honored will rule over the honored. Yavo mi shechumrot, so it's going to really read kula and chumra, right? Nichla. So yavo mi shechumrot omavalav kikalot. Somebody who the most weighty things in the Torah and in halacha they treat as very light and as trivial. V'yirhavu, and they will lord over me over people shekalot omotalav kichamurot, people who are so pious that even the most lightest things they treat as the most heavy. All right, so that again, what that's all doing here is not clear, except for the middle section where it's about here are the people that you can tell over lachash, you can tell over sitrei Torah, or the people that have these attributes, which is going back to a Gemara we had earlier. What? Oh, interesting. The 18 18 things, and then the 19th fach is a tikkun for this. Oh, it's a nice word. I don't know. Nice word. Okay. Amar Rav Katina, says Rav Katina. Now that this verse is talking about how all of the leaders and the wise men and the religious will be wiped out of Yerushalayim at the time of the Churban, he says even when this happened, and no matter how low they fell, people who were trustworthy never stopped. There were always somebody in there that you could trust. Shene'amar, as the verse says, one person will grab to his brother, and they'll say, and you have a cloak, you should be a ruler over us. So in the simple sense, it's basically talking about how lowly the people will have fallen, that somebody who has even a little thing, just like who has a cloak to his name, he's worthy of being the leader. But they're going to read this again through the lens of Torah. And so if they lost all the leaders who clearly were the people who were masters of Torah, now they're going to be looking for somebody who has a little Torah who can be their leader. Okay, so let's take a look. Things that people hide, like a cloak. If you don't want to lend out a cloak, you don't want to lend your clothes out. So yeshnam tachas yadecha, you have those. You have Torah. You should be our leader. Okay, people don't want to talk about Torah because then they'll be shown to not have it. But we know that you actually have it. But this stumbling, things that people don't stand on, meaning that they don't own until they actually have tripped over them, which is basically what the Gemara says about a person is not omeid al divrei Torah, on words of Torah, until you make a mistake, and then you really, put your attention to it, and you internalize it because you've actually made a mistake about it, and you have to learn from your mistake. So these types of things, these areas of Torah, yeshem tachas yadecha, you have this. You should be our leader. No, but he'll rise up that day saying, I will not be a leader. I do not have bread. I do not have a cloak. Again, this is in the literal sense of the verse. Now we'll see how the Gemara is going to explain it. Do not make me a leader of the people. Now we're going to reinterpret that verse. Yisa will lift up. Ein yisa lashon shua. That means he'll take an oath. Shenemar, as the verse says, Lo tisat shema shamalok echel. Okay, don't lift up God's name. So he will take an oath. That's Yisa bayomahu. Now, what is he saying? Lo eyechovesh. So as opposed to where this is future, the Gemara is going to read it in the past. Lo ayisi michovshei beit hamedrash. I was not from those people that would conquer in the house in the study halls. I'm not a Talmid Chacham. Don't come to me. I don't know any Torah. Okay. I don't have bread and I don't have a garment. Mikra, Mishnah. I don't have, I don't know Psukim. I don't know Mishnah, Gemara, and I don't know Gemara. Again, going back to the Lechem is probably the Gemara. I don't know which is the Mikra here, but going back to similar types of metaphors that the Gemara was similar ways the Gemara was interpreting earlier verses. Okay. So anyway, so look. Here's a guy, they want him to be leader because he thinks he's one of the few, again, this is all through the Gemara's lens, he's one of the few people they think might still know a little Torah, and he refuses. So you see, even when they fall so low that nobody knows Torah anymore and those people are all gone, people will at least still be honest. They'll at least refuse to take that position. So the Gemara says, who says it's honesty that's doing it? The Gemara says, V'dil mashani hasam, the Amrluhu, Gemirna, maybe it's different there, because if he says to them, I know Torah, thank you very much, I will be the leader, I do know Torah, Amrilei, they'll say to him, Eim Alan, so tell us over, it's our Torah, tell us over some teaching. So therefore, of course, it's not because he's honest, it's because he'll be shown up. Right? He can't say that he has it, because then it'll turn out that he's being clear that he's lying, but it's not fundamentally about being honest. So the Gemara says no. No, because he could have said, you know what, you're right. I had Torah, but I forgot it all. So, and as opposed to saying, I never learned. So that already is a level of honesty to say I never learned rather than just saying I had and I lost. I just have to tell you this great line that one of my students said to me, right, the year before he got smicha. I saw him in the base medrash and he was like being Mavir Sedra there with like Rashi or something. And I said to him, it's really good you're being Mavir Sedra. He says, Rabbi Linzer, he says, you know why I'm being Mavir the Parsha with Rashi? I said, no, why? He said, because until now, if somebody were to ask me, what does Rashi say on this pasuk? I'd have to say I don't know. But now I can say I don't remember. So, so there you go. That's exactly this Gemara. Okay, anyway. So the Gemara says, My lo yechovesh. What does it mean that I was not a chovesh, a conqueror? We'll see how it explains chovesh. Lo yechovesh klal. So, I'm sorry, no, that's ending the other point. My lawyer, when he says I was at a chodesh, it means I never learned Torah, not just that I knew it and I forgot. So that's the honesty. Amy, is this really true? Doesn't Rava say that Yerushalayim was not destroyed until any people of trustworthiness were completely ceased from it, destroyed from it? As the verse says, go seek out in the in the streets of Yerushalayim, and see and know. Seek out in its streets. If you'll find a person, if you're one person who is doing justice, who is seeking after after honesty and trustworthiness, I'll forgive it. So you see, there was nobody left. So the verse says, "Lokach." It's not difficult. Ha b'divrei Torah, ha b'masav mata, and that's such a good answer. So one is when it comes to Torah, to be honest and admit you never learned, there will always be people that will be honest about their Torah knowledge. When it comes to money, when it comes to business, nobody honest is left. Okay, b'divrei Torah havu. When it comes to Torah, being honest about your Torah knowledge, people will be okay to be honest. Actually, could talk about how far they've fallen, that they're not embarrassed to admit that they don't know Torah. B'masu mata, when it comes to business matters, lo havu, no honest person is left. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan. Now we get to an interesting story. Maybe we only have 5 minutes, but I think we'll get a good way down here about teaching Ma'aseh Merkava. Let's take a look. Ma'aseh Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai shaya rochev al chamor. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was on a donkey. V'hayim halech b'derech, and he was going on the way. Rabbi Linzer ben Arach mechamer achavav. Rabbi Linzer ben Arach, who we know very little of, was walking after him after the donkey. Amar lo, and he said to him, Rabbi, Shanali Perak Echad b'Maaseh Merkava. Teach me something about the Maaseh Merkava. Here we are, we're just walking on the way, we have nothing to talk about. Let's talk about Maaseh Merkava. Amar lo, he said to him, Lo kach shaniti lachem, haven't I taught you? V'lo b'Merkava b'yachid, you can't teach Merkava even to a single individual, elim kein hayachacham mevin midato, unless he could figure things out by his own. So Amar lo, Rabbi, so he said to him, Rabbi, Tarsheni lomar lefanecha davar echad shlim datani. Let me tell you something that you taught us. Meaning, I'll show you what I was able to figure out on my own, just in case you were wondering, I am that person. So I'm going to tell you something you taught me. Now, again, it presumably he means, not that I'm just going to tell you back something you taught me. You thought I wasn't picking up on what you were teaching. I'm going to show you what I heard from what you were teaching me. Amar lo emor. He said, good, tell me. Miyad yarad Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai me'al hachamor. So he got off the donkey, v'nitatei yashav ala even tachas hazayit, and he sat on a stone under an olive tree. You can imagine that every section of this story is explained, symbolically and and metaphorically by different people. Amar lo. So he said to him, Rabbi, mipnei yaradata me'al hachamor. Why did you get off the donkey? Amar efshar ata doresh b'maseh merkava v'shchina imanu malachi hasharis. Is it possible you will be explicating Maaseh Merkava and the divine presence will be with us and the heavenly angels will be accompanying us, and I should be on the donkey? I have to do it for respect of the Shekhinah that is going to be joining us. Again, so it's fascinating because Rabbi Linzer ben Arach was wise enough to understand what Rabbi Yochanan was teaching, but he didn't realize apparently the power of what was behind it. So let's take a look. Miyad, Patak Rabbi Linzer ben Arach, the Maaseh Merkava, he began to expound Maaseh Merkava, the Darash, and he explicated, the Yarda, Eish min hashamayim, a fire came out of heaven, the Sivicha et kol ilanot, and it sort of singed or surrounded all of the trees, Shebesadeh, Pitchu kulan v'amru shira, and they all opened up, all of the trees presumably, and gave forth a song. Amashira amru, and what did they say? Haluat Hashem min haaretz, taninim v'chol tamot, eitz pri v'chol arazim. So all the trees will praise God. Hallelujah. Nena malach mina eish v'amar. Then the angel of the fire, who was down, who presumably had brought the fire, responded and said, Hey nein Maaseh Merkava. What he is teaching, he's got it exactly right. That is the doings of the divine chariot. So again, notice, by the way, right, the relationship of earth and heaven, the ability to access what's up in heaven. So before we talked about praying and changing things in heaven, here you can bring heaven down to earth. That's Maaseh Merkava, to see the vision and to bring heaven down to earth. Hey nein Maaseh Merkava. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai got up and kissed him on his head. Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael. Praise God. Blessed is God, the God of Israel. Shenasan ben Avram Avinu. He gave such a son to Avram, our father. Who knows to understand maybe to understand by understanding the hints that I gave him, and to investigate and to expound in the Maaseh Merkava. There are those that expound beautifully and do not fulfill beautifully. Or fulfill but do not expound. You expound beautifully and fulfill. Now, of course, the question is what fulfill is going on here. This is a phrase used in another context, which has to do with acting, in accordance with one's teaching. So the Bach switches the gears and takes out the Na'em Mikayim from this whole thing. The Marsha suggests that it just means you expounded beautifully and it actually corresponded to the truth. And that's the Na'em Mikayim. Ashrecha Avram Avinu, praised are you, Avram, our father, Elazar ben Arach yatsa mechalatzecha, that Elazar ben Arach came out of your loins. Of course, why Avram is being brought into this context, I don't know. What is the relationship of Avraham? I mean, maybe he had that first direct communication with God, but still, it's a little bit unclear what the association is exactly with Avraham. What? He wrote the Zohar. No, the Shema Yochai. Maybe he wrote the Sefer Yetzirah. Okay, is that what the footnotes say? All right. Now, when this story was told over Rabbi Yoshua, he and Rabbi Yossi HaKohen were going in the way. Amru, they said, oh, well, they use an opportunity to talk about Maaseh Merkava. We'll do the same. Rabbi Yoshua opened up and expounded. The Ozo Yom Tkufas Tammuz Haya, and it was the middle of summer. And the sky filled with clouds. V'nira Kamin Keshet Ba'anan, and a rainbow appeared. And the heavenly angels were coming to hear the shir. Like people who come to see, like in the games or in the rejoicing of a chassan and kala, which is interesting. Why are the angels coming to here? Don't they know better? So on one hand, it might be saying really like this amazing statement, like no, they could not understand better what's happening up in heaven than the angels. But it also seems to me that that's why it gives the comparison of mazmute chassan v'kala. Like you want to see people getting the pleasure and enjoyment of it, even if you're not necessarily being a part of that, even if you're not necessarily learning something from that. 1 minute. Halach Rabbi Yossi HaKohen v'siper adram lifnei Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So Rabbi Yossi HaKohen, who was one of the pair, went and told Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai about that amazing conversation that they had with Rabbi Yoshua. The Amar Ashreichem v'Ashrei Yiladaschem. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, since he gave this beautiful praise to Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, now he's going to give a similar praise to Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Yossi HaKohen. Praised are you, and praised are those that have given birth to you. I'm not going all the way back to Avraham Avinu. Ashrei ein, I praised are my eyes to kach ra'u, that I have seen this. I mean, we saw the visions I saw when I was doing with Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, and I've seen that you also have been able to have these types of experiences. V'afani v'atem b'chalomi, and even you and I in my dream, I saw Mesubim hayinu al Har Sinai. We were reclining by Har Sinai. Just that image, reclining. I mean, Mesubim is something used when you eat. There are the people that see God and they vayachazu at halokim vayochlu vayishtu, and they ate and drank. So maybe he's putting himself in that category of those that were Har Sinai and had that vision of God and ate and drank in God's presence. V'nizna aleinu basko min hashamayim, and a heavenly voice came out from heaven. Alu l'kan, come up here, come up here. Tarkalin, right? Of course, as opposed to Har Sinai, where it was where there was the boundaries and people couldn't go up. Here, they're like on a higher level. They're being told to come up, come up. Tarkalin gedolinu matzaot naot mutzaot lachem. Big castles and beautiful cushions are laid out for you. Lachem atem v'tamidechem, you and your students, v'talmidei tamidechem, and your students, mizumanim l'kas shlishit, you are going to be in the third group of people in the presence of God. So third, what about first and second? Apparently that was like as high as they could hope for. Okay, so we'll end here. We'll continue tomorrow. I just want to say one thing about Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. We know very little about Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, except the statement in Pirkei Avot that says he was like a Ma'ayan HaMitgaber. Okay, and that fits in very perfectly with this. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai thought, you don't know anything. And he said, no, you know what, here's what I have figured out from the little that you have taught and that you have hinted to. So that's, again, the Mayana Mitgaber, and he was then able to create, to even teach Rabbi Yochanan and create this enormous experience. Okay.
Before we talk today, we have, on the occasion of your birthday, token of our
thank